Welcome to the 5th episode with Parris Lampropoulos. He is arguably one of the best copywriters alive. And today we're going to ask him a bunch of questions. He has been doing really well with a supplement company. He's still teaching copywriters, probably producing the best copywriters in the world right now. So we're going to try to figure out how he does it so that we can learn from that as a business owner, marketer, etc., etc. Now, I don't like doing long intros. So I'm going to ask you a question that's kind of going to do your intro. So I want to ask you, who was like 2 or 3 of your most influential mentors in the past? Because you're going to drop some names now that are going to surprise a lot of people because they have maybe read their work and they are not alive anymore. So let's get started.
You want me to do people who aren't alive anymore?
It's up to you.
Well, I have so many mentors. To just limit it to 3 would be very difficult. So, but if we want to do people who aren't alive anymore, my first one was Gary Halbert. He was my gateway drug into copywriting, direct response. And then my second one right after Gary was Ted Nicholas. He's no longer with us either. And then who else who's not alive? My dear friend and brother, Clayton Makepeace.
Yeah, so those names are pretty well known in the copywriting / marketing space. And you're also pretty well known because when I told some people, like, hey, I'm going to do a podcast with Parris, and it's, oh, Parris, oh man, he has been doing this forever. Yeah, so how long have you been doing this stuff?
I paid them to say that. No, I've been doing this for 34 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people these days, I remember when I used to be the youngest guy in the room, but now I'm usually not the youngest guy in the room. And people usually introduce me as an OG, which I'll take that any day. It's better than saying, hey, Grandpa, come here and tell us about the old days of direct mail. So OG, I like that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to also mention. Like, I look at you as an OG. So there we go. So we have been spending some time together last 3 days at an event. So I've had the pleasure of learning from you. And I think I want to start there if it's not too secret what we're going to talk about. We talked a little bit about breakthrough advertising.
Yes, we did.
Now, you don't have to share your secrets, but I'm curious what you think that most people get wrong when they...
Well, it's not so much these days, but back in the day, so many people read the book, but so few understood it. And I find today's marketers understand it a lot better. And that's probably because there's people out there who have distilled it. It's really ironic because Gene Schwartz made a fortune by writing ads that were written simply, and then he writes this book that's virtually impenetrable, right? So a lot of people have talked. I always thought it was the best book ever written, hands down. I mean, and so I taught it to people, and John Ford, copywriter John Ford, who's done a lot of work with Agora, he was the one who created the current terminology of, what does he call it? Brand aware, product aware, problem aware, solution aware, and not unaware, right? And Gene didn't use that language in the book. It was more complex, and John Ford broke it down to a very simple way to understand it. But there are still some people who don't get it. There's people who get confused between the stages of awareness and the stages of sophistication. They're two totally separate, totally different things. So, a lot of times people get mixed up about that.
Yeah, that was also the eye-opener for me last weekend to really see those differences. And if I got it right, like when you train people, you don't recommend breakthrough advertising as the first book, right? Because it's so...
No, because they have no context to base it on. It's just, I usually start people off with the basics. I usually start them off with Vic Schwab, how to write a good advertisement. And then we'll do Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and influence people. Then after that, we'll do William Zinsser on writing well, because a lot of people have really bad writing habits, and they have to unlearn the bad habits and replace them with good habits. So I want to start teaching them the writing part very early, and so they could practice and drill it and get better and better and better.
Yeah. So that's actually also kind of where I wanted to get started with my first question from my notes. a lot of people, myself included, don't write that well.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in some cases it's good enough.
Damn foreigners.
Damn foreigners, yeah. Actually, it's funny for me if I'm making mistakes in my writing, but I'm outperforming US copywriters. Gotta be honest, that feels a little bit good.
That's the best revenge of all. Yeah.
But so what I wanted to ask you is that we talked about that last few days as well. It's like, even if you have mediocre copywriting, if you have the right offer or the right product, you can still make it work.
Well, obviously the product and the offer is going to trump anything.
Exactly.
Right? But then if you're in the business that I was in for many years, which is you're a hired gun going up against controls to beat the controls, you both have the same product and the same offer, right? So that's where the copy is going to come through. And again, the hook and the headline and the opening is going to trump everything else. But you want to grab people's attention, but you also need to keep their attention long enough till they buy. And a lot of people will lose people because they're writing in a way that's unclear, confusing, unbelievable, boring. Mark Ford and John Ford in their book, well, it wasn't that book. It was Copy Logic, that book. They have the CUB method. They have an acronym, CUB, which C stands for confusing, U stands for unbelievable, B stands for boring. So they would just have people, here, read this. It doesn't have to be a copywriter. In fact, it's better if it's not a copywriter, if it's a regular person, if it's a person who's a prospect for your product. Have them read it. And number one, so something I learned from Gary Halbert, if you're reading your copy to people or if they're reading it, there's only one there's only one response you ever want to get from them. And that's, oh my God, where do I buy this? Like if they're saying, wow, this is really great. You sure write real good. No, right? It's like if you've ever pitched from the stage, right, to sell something from speaking on a stage and people go to the back of the room to buy something. The worst thing you can ever get is a standing ovation. If you get a standing ovation, it means no one's going to buy. Now, it's great to get a standing ovation if you're just giving a talk that's imparting information and stuff. But if you're trying to sell from the stage, there's only one reaction you want. You want people running to the back of the room with their credit cards. So the same thing with copy. Now, having said that, you can have people read your copy. Like Dan Rosenthal used to have everybody at the agency, when he had his ad agency where Gary Benzavenga was the copy chief or creative director. And everyone in the office would read the copy. The receptionist, the janitor, the other copywriters. Especially you want the receptionist and the janitor, because if they don't understand it, that means you made it too complicated, right? I don't care if you're writing to rocket scientists. You got to make it easier to read. PhDs, anybody. I mean, yeah, they can understand hard stuff, but everyone likes something that's easy and fun to read. You can't make it a chore for people. So anyway, he would send it to everybody. And that's what they started doing at Agora. And they had the CUB method. And people would highlight or circle or anything that was confusing, they'd put a C. Anything that's unbelievable, they put a U. Anything that's boring, they put a B. And now the copywriter gets it back, and now they know they have to fix those sections.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to take one step back and go back to the original team, and that was like, hey, a great offer or product, trumps the copywriting. So where I wanted to go with that is I kind of wanted to ask you, how do you pick your clients or your projects right now, and how did you do that in the past? Because what I have seen is that most of the time the offers that I actually scaled, meaning like, they didn't get stuck at a ceiling, but really went mass market, those were really great offers, right? It wasn't, again, not that much about the copy. You could pretty much do everything you want. So I'm curious, I guess maybe that has changed over time, but how do you decide whether you would hire a client back in the day? And how do you look at things that you would take on right now? For example, like what would you look for to launch, let's say, another project?
Okay, so back in the day when I was a freelancer for hire, I would choose clients based on just a few things, really. Number one, are the dollars there, right? Is it something that has the potential to sell a lot? Because I was paid on performance, right? The more I sell, the more I earn. And when you're a copywriter or any other service provider, you're really in the opportunity cost business. Every time you say yes to one, you're saying no to another. So why would you say yes to something that's going to make you $20,000 when you can say yes to something that's going to make you $200,000, right? So there was always that aspect. The other things that are very important, it was a good product that works, that does what it says it does, that helps people's lives, right? Because why would I fucking sell garbage? And number 3 was something that interested me. So it could be the greatest thing in the world for a market that I have no interest in and I find boring, and then I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you have to go really deep and do your research properly too.
Yeah, and you have to have enthusiasm. One of my first mentors, another person who passed away quite recently, is a fellow named Chip Wood. And he was a client for a very long time, and I continue to work with his son today, and he and I are like brothers. And so Chip said to me, if he would write financial stuff, and a lot of it was politically oriented, and he said, if you don't believe in the message and the mission that we have here, you'll be able to write good copy, but you won't be able to write great copy.
Yeah, I felt that as well. Like, if you're not passionate about it, then you're kind of forcing yourself. It's hard to get in flow state and all these things. And I guess also the first thing you started with is funny, kind of, for me. Like, do they pay and will they make a lot of money? Because most people don't even think about it. It's like they just, whether they're a freelancer,
well, they're desperate for work, and they'll just take
money.
anything that comes along. And look, when I first started out, I had no track record whatsoever. Yeah, I took whatever comes along, right?
Yeah.
But use that. See, I took my original assignments that I took, my first 4 gigs or whatever you want to call it. Actually, my first 2 gigs I did for free. I just wanted to get some samples under my belt and some track record under my belt. Mm-hmm. So the first things actually I wrote for my own products, and the copy was good, but I didn't know anything about business, so I was losing my shirt. And back then we didn't have the internet. We didn't have products that you could deliver digitally. You actually had to print them and store them in your garage.
Or a CD.
Everything is easier now. There were no VAs. There were no, you had to pay for postage to put on the letters to mail out. And I was doing such a small scale that my costs were through the roof. I knew nothing about business, right? I didn't know about back-end products and having high-end products. I just sold cheap stuff on the front end, because that's what I saw the big mailers doing. I didn't realize, well, only the big mailers can afford to do that. So those were my first sales letters, were stuff I wrote selling my own products. Then my first sales letter for somebody else, I did 2 things for free for other people. So now I've got 4 samples under my belt. And then I start just getting clients, again, just to get work, just to get samples, just to get a track record of successes. And you start with whatever clients you can get. And typically, for the most part, not always, but they're going to be not the greatest clients. And you'll charge a flat fee, and probably not a very high one. But then what you do is you use them as a stepping stone to get a slightly better client. So you start with a shitty client and go to a mediocre client and go to an okay, decent client, and then a good client, and then a very good client, and then a great client. And next thing you know, you're writing for the big boys, right? So it's, in breakthrough advertising, he has this concept of gradualization, which you do in copy. You take somebody from where they are and you move them to where they want to be. You start where the reader is, and you say things slowly, logically, step by step. And if you do that, you could get people to believe almost anything you want, provided that you have that logical step from here to here. So in the book, Influenced by Robert Cialdini, he talked about how American POWs in the Korean War, they were brainwashed into becoming communists.
Yeah.
And like, these are, soldiers. These were trained people. But the way the Koreans did it is they said, look, we'll give you an extra carton of cigarettes if you just write a few sentences about how America's not perfect. Surely you can agree America's not perfect. And they go, okay. And once they've done that, they're down the slippery slope. And, 6 months later, they're like totally brainwashed. So, but great. So you can use gradualization to brainwash people. You can use it to sell stuff, but you can also use it to move from shitty clients to great clients, little by little by little. And the story I like to tell, and this is a true story, it's not like an urban legend. You can look it up on, on Wikipedia and stuff. There was a guy who had a paperclip. And he went over to somebody at his office and said, hey, I'll trade you this paperclip for that pen. And she said, sure. And then he took that pen and he traded it to somebody else for something else. And then he traded what he got for something else. I think he did not a lot of trades, maybe 8 trades tops. Guess what he ended up with?
Surprised me.
A house.
A house. Well, that sounds
house.
like a good
He
deal.
started with a freaking paperclip and ended up with a house. So gradualization, one of the things I say to my copy cubs is, how they say that the strongest force in the universe is the thing that holds atoms together? No, gradualization. That's the strongest force of the universe.
Clear. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Now, when you get a client, of course, you also have to deliver.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff about market research.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you have like a counterintuitive opinion on market research, or if there's something that you see a lot of copywriters not do that actually prevents them from writing good copy.
Well, the number one thing is they don't want to put in the time to do the research. They don't want to put in the work. They just phone it in, right? So the game is won and lost in the research. If you don't understand the product, if you don't understand the market environment that the product is being in, what's the stage of awareness, what's the stage of sophistication, who your competitors are. And if you don't, above all, if you don't understand the prospect who you're writing to, you're toast.
So you mean like they just don't put in the hours?
They don't put in the hours. Or they kind of just half-ass it. They just, I checked off all the boxes. I did a few interviews and I checked some controls. It's like when I would go to these, that AWAI, which is an offshoot of Agora that trains copywriters. And you can always see the difference between the people who come out of there and do great and the people who come out of there and never make it. And it's all in like the work ethic and the mindset. So there's an annual boot camp that they do, and they have a job fair. And some people just kind of go through the motions. Okay, I did everything I'm supposed to do. I attended the events. I took notes. I went to the job fair. I went to 5 different booths. But they were just kind of phoning it in. They were just checking it off. I did everything. No, the ones who go far are the ones who hang out at the bar and meet people like me or David Deutsch or Paul Hollingshead or John Ford and have conversations with them and befriend them. And like, that's how I got most of my copy cups. We'd hang out at the bar at the event and we'd get to know each other. Oh my God, I'm an introvert. Yeah, guess what? So am I. Oh my God, I'm shy. Guess what? So am I.
Yeah.
You got to do what you have to do. And the people who get the results are the ones who are willing to do what the others aren't willing to do. And it's really as simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, that really surprised me the last 3 days that you, like, about supplements and health, like you are like literally a walking encyclopedia combined with dictionary, combined with, every article on PubMed, and you're really like into that stuff, right?
I used to know every article on PubMed.
Yeah, it was
not so
a
much
joke,
anymore. But yeah, man, you got to do the work. Are there shortcuts that can make your life easier? Sure. But that doesn't mean you don't do the work. See, there's people who abdicate, like with AI, right? There seems to be 2 sides of the spectrum. One side is the people who say, oh, it's total crap, it's worthless. And the other side is the people who say, I don't have to write anything. I just do a prompt and the AI does it for me. Bullshit. If you don't know what good copy is, you're not going to know how to write the prompt, and you're not going to know if the AI gave you something good or not.
True.
So you got to put in the work in advance, right? Once you get to a certain level, you can make things a little easier for yourself. But, it's like trying to get in good shape without going to the gym. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned put in the work, but how do you know that you put in the work, right? We know now, you should not do the bare minimum, but like, is that for you like a feeling, or you just see all the information starts repeating itself, or what's kind of like how you
So
check yourself.
Gary Benvenga said, I don't start writing till I have 7 times more than I can use. So I read that. I said, okay, if that's what Gary does, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're writing a, whatever, 10,000 word thing, which is going to be 40 pages in a Word doc, you got to have 7 times 40 is 280 pages of notes. Now, it's got to be good stuff, right? So there is a feeling to it, right? So here's another thing is when you're going for the hook or the idea. There's a writer named Richard Armstrong who for many years was journeyman copywriter. He was good, but, he was just kind of good. And then he started, I started seeing him at events like Clayton's event and Gary Benvenga's event and all this kind of stuff. And next thing you know, like, he's one of the best copywriters in the world. Like, he's actually taken 3 controls from me. Like, you can count on your hands the number of people who've ever beaten me in this split test even once, no less 3 times, right? And he said, well, here's the secret is in the old days, I would get an idea and say, cool, I got an idea. And I'd write the thing. He goes, now I get an idea. I go, okay, there's one idea. Let's see what else I got.
Yeah.
So it comes down to mindset. I think I mentioned over these last few days, when my mindset, when I was going up against another writer to beat the control, I didn't just want to beat them. I wanted to annihilate them, right? I don't want to just beat him by 15, 20%, and then he comes back against me and beats me by 15 or 20%. No, I wanted to destroy him. I wanted to give him PTSD, so he never even fucking thinks of, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, of course. We'll bleep it out.
Are we going to beep it out?
I don't know. We'll see.
So he doesn't even think of ever going up against me again, right? That you have to have, Gary Halbert used to call it a fighter pilot attitude. That's what you have to have. Like, losing is not an option. Okay. Yeah. Though that is totally unacceptable to me to go write for a client and not crush it. It's unacceptable. Now, has it happened? Yeah, but I've been doing this 34 years and it hasn't happened very many times. Could count on my hand how many times that's happened. So it's the fighter pilot attitude. The losing is not an option. It's like Mike Tyson when he would get into the ring. He would say, yeah, I'm there to kill the guy. That's what I'm there to do. Right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, I think I mentioned this, is, I work for royalties. So most writers just look at it as an assignment. Oh, I'm going to do this assignment. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to submit it to the client. And then I'm going to go to the next one. No, I don't look at it as an assignment. I look at it as an annuity.
Yeah.
I have a control that's been running 15 years. I have multiple controls that run over a decade. I had controls that paid my mortgage and car payments for a decade.
That's cool. It's actually interesting because I don't feel like many new copywriting coaches talk about that, like the whole dominating thing. And what was a big eye opener for me, like I always tell everybody around me, like, hey, above average kind of sucks because you just have to put in a little bit of effort to be above average. But then I came to your event, they were like, hey, the top 20% gets 80% of the results. And I'm like,
that's right.
I'm in that category. But then you were like, but within that top 20%, there's another 20% that get even better results.
Right.
And then in that 20%, another 20%. I'm like, yeah, that's such a different way of looking at things. That's really like, yeah, you're like dominating. You're like Genghis Khan, but then with copywriting. And
Genghis
I feel like
Khan, I like that.
Yeah, but we'll talk more about the Chinese and Mongolian empires later if you're okay with that. But so I think that's really interesting. Like that did all the older copywriters and the mentors that you learned from have that mindset that they were there to dominate, or is that something that you kind of developed for yourself?
Fighter pilot attitude line I got from Halbert, and he said, imagine you had a gun to your head, and if you had to write one sales letter that's get mailed to one person, and if that person didn't buy, they're blowing your brains out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
That's funny.
If that were the case, would you write this in your copy? Is this the headline you would go with? No, I wouldn't. I would not risk my life on this lame pansy ass headline, right?
That's funny because I guess in the whole coaching scene, people really became politically correct. And now people don't really say this anymore. But that really resonated with
It's
me.
the
I'm like, yeah,
wussification of America.
wussification of America.
It totally is.
But also of business owners, I guess, because before they were there's like Atlas Shrugged kind of people who are really trying to dominate. But now, I guess that's not as cool anymore.
You know, Elon Musk is
Yeah,
pretty,
right.
you know, that guy's a killer. He's out to dominate, right?
Yeah.
All the most successful people in general, look, with Elon, it wasn't about the money, from what I understand. It's a great biography, that Elon Musk biography that, what's his name? Walter Isaacson wrote. Fascinating stuff. You know, before he came along, like the military contractors would charge a fortune to build you a plane or a rocket, and it would take 10 years, and, you know, it would have overruns and problems. And then Elon figures out how to do it in like a year for like a tenth the cost. And all the rockets going up now are made by SpaceX.
Yeah.
And then he did the same thing for Tesla, right? Like a lot of people were shorting the stock saying, oh, it's ridiculous. I was one of those people, by the way. I was totally wrong on that one. I thought Tesla stock was overpriced.
A bunch of money.
But because I didn't know what he was doing, right?
Yeah.
I didn't buy it or short it or anything. I was just you know, armchair pundit, just talking about shit I didn't even know what the fuck I was talking about, right? So, but when you read the book, he had an algorithm. He said every single step in the process, you have to question the assumptions. Well, we got this screw there. Well, why is it there? I don't know. That's how we do it. Well, why don't we find out? And the other thing that was really cool that we're implementing in the businesses that I'm involved with is everyone has to be responsible. Every task on every flow chart has a person assigned to it, and the person isn't a copywriter or media buyer or, you know, production manager. The person is Joe or Bob or Susie. There's an actual human being's name, and they're responsible for it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't know how we got on this tangent, but
no worries.
Yeah.
I got you.
Oh, the killer attitude.
Killer instinct.
Look, you know, Elon wasn't in it. From all accounts, he wasn't in it because of the money, but the money was a byproduct because he was in it like, I want to go to outer space.
Yeah.
We have to colonize Mars because Earth is going to be uninhabitable. Now, whether
fucked.
you believe that or not, you know, it sounds pretty crazy, but look what he's done as a result of that.
Would you want to go to space? Let's say you can live forever.
No, absolutely not.
Even if you could inject your brain in a robot and then
no, I'm not into that shit, the singularity or any of that stuff.
You don't want to go into space?
No, man. I mean, I might go as a tourist to go like a little thing like William Shatner did, where you go on a little ride. But I would not to go to Mars, spend months in a spaceship and go live on another planet. I don't even want to go like, you know, live on the other side of the country and be away from my friends and family, you know?
But let's say you could bring your friends and family and it would only take a week.
I couldn't get them to move to San Diego. I'm not moving. They're not going to move to Mars.
All right. I guess that imaginary scenario is going to stop there.
Anyway, but I am looking forward to when they invent teleportation, because that'll be pretty freaking cool.
That would save us a lot of
I'll
time.
not have to drive to the airport and do all that bullshit and fly and all that. So my immediate goal is to fly private all the time. So
you want to have your own?
Well, I don't have to own it.
Okay, got it. So now we talked about like the research, but sometimes things don't work out, right? So I'm curious, how do you deal with that? Like
things don't work out sometimes.
Yeah, you told me you were 85% right. So
about that? Well, my track record for beating with the control was roughly 85%, depending on when you got me. Like, what was my latest thing I did, right? So it would hover right around that number, and that was Ben Zavenga's also, and Gene Schwartz also.
Yeah, but so my question is, what is your thought process when something doesn't immediately work out, or you know, you don't beat the control? What's next? Or it's not even about beat the control. Like, let's say it doesn't work. What do you do? Like, what goes through your mind?
Well, if there's any life at all, you try to fix it, right?
Yeah, but
if it's just totally bombs dead in the water, like, okay, you know, it just probably not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So the other thing is, if you're writing for a new product, well, you don't know why it bombed. Was it the product? Was it the copy?
Yeah.
Right. So I typically wouldn't write for new products.
Yeah.
Now, being a partner in a supplement company, we're releasing new products all the time. So, we do it. But when I was a copywriter for hire and I'm working for royalties, why would I risk, again, opportunity costs? Why would I write for an unproven product? People would say, hey, we're launching this new thing. You want to do it? I go, no, why don't you hire somebody else to get a control for you and then hire me to go beat that guy?
Yeah. All right. That makes sense. So, but with the new supplement lines, you would like then hire someone else and then try to beat that again, or like?
Well, so, I don't really write copy anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, the greatest day of my life was the day I fired myself as chief copywriter and hired myself as CopyChief. So I have writers who I train and they write it and I CopyChief them. So there's a lot of training. I mean, you see, the most important thing to me, remember how we were saying that the money is a byproduct? To me, the money is a byproduct of doing a great job for the client and ultimately for the client's customers. So I always look at the end user in mind. I learned this from Jay Abraham. He said, look, don't just do stuff for your client, do for your client's customer, for the end user. Because if you're doing right by them, then your client will get the good result, and in turn, you'll get the good result.
Yeah.
So I was always about having the best quality copy I could do. And when I decided that I was going to multiply myself, because I was just a freelancer and there's only so many pieces I could write a year, I started hiring writers, and then they would do the first draft and I would rewrite it, and that doubled our output. But I was like, I'm not going to do this unless we can maintain the same quality.
Yeah.
Because my track record and my reputation is more important to me than whether I make a few bucks writing for something, right? Yeah. So, you get what you want in life, right? There's, some notable writers in our space who they make no qualms about. They're just doing it for the money. Guess what? They're making a lot of money, but they're also leaving disgruntled clients in their wake.
Yeah.
So I don't like disgruntled clients. I'm not going to say, like I said, I'm not going to say I've never bombed, but they've been few and far between. And it's because I'm really obsessed with getting the best result. And as a result, it's been very lucrative for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of my frustrations. Like, I'm not a native writer, speaker, but then if I hired a copywriter and it didn't really perform, I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then there's a bunch of people online who teach you how to become a copywriter in 90 days.
Who don't know how to write copy, but they're teaching copywriting.
Exactly. And after hearing what you put your students through to actually learn copywriting, I'm like, it kind of makes sense that all these other people don't know how to write proper copy and just kind of randomly do something. I don't know how deep you can or go in there, but something you said is like, I'm trying to make them quit, right? It's like multiple months. It takes a year.
When I get the new copy cubs, first I try to talk them out of joining. And then if they're still stupid enough to want to do it, I do everything I can to make them quit and make their life hell for the first few months.
Yeah. And like you said that they invest quite a lot of time every week, like 4 months studying, right?
Right.
It's not like 90 days, just watch these 20 hours of videos.
You're not going to get great at it. I hate to burst everybody's bubble. You're not going to get great at anything in 90 days.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to say this, to kind of like expose a few people without calling their names and hoping that we get more good copywriters in the world after they watch this, conversation and realize, okay, maybe I have to put in some work. So on average, how long does it take you to train someone where you're like happy?
So within a few months, they're writing good emails.
Mm-hmm.
And then within a year or 2 or 3, depending on the person, they can write VSLs.
Yeah, because I guess what I always felt like, I started writing ads, never really done emails, but I kind of can judge whether it's a good email.
And somebody's going to laugh at me. What are you talking about? There's guys who came off the street and wrote a VSL. Yeah, that happens. There's
Outliers,
people who are super talented and smart and creative and great sales. So, but they always came with something. They didn't come out of the womb knowing how to write a VSL.
Yeah.
Like they either had a really strong sales background or a strong writing background or both.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe they're creative too. So like, let's take Arthur Johnson, one of the all-time greats, right? He had been a copywriter at the Franklin Mint, selling those stupid collectible plate thingies. No offense to anyone if you're a customer of the Franklin Mint, but it's not. It's selling a collectible plate is a different kind of copy than selling an investment newsletter for Agora, right? And finding the 101st way to sell it when it's been sold 100 different times before, right? So Arthur had worked at different, copywriting jobs, and there was a designer also deceased. His name was David Wise, and he had done work for Agora and Boardroom. Some of you who've been around the block may remember a company called Boardroom Reports or Bottom Line Publishing. And one of those two clients, I forget which, asked him, hey, we need copywriters, which, guess what? It's like today, 20 years ago, 20 years from now, everybody has the same problem. Not enough good copywriters. Do you know anybody? And he said, well, I have this buddy, Arthur Johnson. Now, Arthur's never written for any of these type of markets, right? You might consider him a newbie in this whole thing. But he knew human psychology, he knew salesmanship, and he was a really, really smart guy. And he looked at these Magalog things that they were writing. He goes, oh, I get it. This is just like writing a term paper. Yeah, I could do that. Right? So he had gone to the University of Pennsylvania and written a shit ton of term papers. So when you're writing a Magalog or a long form VSL to sell a financial newsletter, it's like writing a term paper. You've got your thesis that you're trying to prove. You've got all your evidence to prove it, right? So people who seem to have done well overnight, behind that is previous experience that they brought to the table. So I wrote a lot of term papers in college. I actually studied rhetoric, the art of persuasion. That's what my major was in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's interesting because at some point I started realizing you have all these hero stories out there of people who supposedly came out of nothing. And I always started asking myself, like, hey, what was their previous experience that made them able to do that? Because then I could kind of figure out, like, hey, am I the same person? So can I duplicate those results?
You don't have to be the same person.
No, but
you have your own. Everybody has their own.
Of course. But if they went to Harvard and they were like super high IQ and all that stuff, and then they blew up. No, that's why I'm saying, like, there's some cases where you really see, like, oh, they grew up in a rich family, they went to the best private school here and there. And it's like, that probably
that
helps.
Certainly gives you advantages, but in some ways it gives you a disadvantage. Growing up poor gave me certain advantages. I grew up dirt poor.
That is also definitely
by the time I was in college, my father was doing really well. He owned a business. He was a millionaire. But when I was a kid, we barely scraping by, like really poor, not just fake poor, like middle class. No, we were poor. And my parents were immigrants, right? But by the time, one of the greatest gifts is that I got to see it's possible because I saw my father do it. I saw him come from nothing and become successful. So I went out to do the same thing. Now I spent a lot of years being unsuccessful because I never had a job.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I had it to do over again, I'd get a job at some direct response company, like Agora or Golden Hippo or Beachbody or V-Shred or something, right?
Yeah.
Mind Valley, and you earn while you learn. But I didn't do that. I just jumped in and started my own businesses and didn't know what the hell I was doing and struggled for a long time before I finally got it together and figured it out.
Yeah, same here. So talking about that, like, which companies inspire you right now? You already mentioned Golden Hippo. I mean, I think inspire is maybe not the right word, but who do you look at least because they're doing interesting stuff?
Well, Golden Hippo is the one I'm always looking at because they're selling in a lot of the same verticals we are, and they're selling a lot more than we are. That's one for sure. But, I'll go on AdSpy or AdBeat or any of those spy tools, and I'll look at what's doing well. And, I'll say, well, what can I learn from this piece? See, Gary Benzavenga said you should spend at least some time every day reading or studying controls.
Gotcha. And for you, that's mainly looking at ads then?
When you say ads,
it starts in the ads library or with AdSpy, and
right.
And then you go into the VSL.
And there's another spy tool I just heard about that's supposedly does everything, because AdSpy is for Facebook and AdBeats for native and for Google, and then VidTow is for YouTube. But I heard there was one now that you can look at everybody everywhere.
Interesting.
I have to find my notes.
Yeah, it would be great.
Put it down.
Yeah, that makes sense. Gotcha. So did you also work with / for Agora or no?
Did I work what?
For Agora?
I wasn't an employee there. I was a freelancer. I did a few projects for them, which was amazing because back then I was personally CopyChiefed by Bill Bonner and Mark Ford.
Mm-hmm. Anything new that you saw there?
That's like ridiculous. Can you imagine just how lucky is that, right?
Yes.
Like them on the phone with me, both at the same time critiquing my copy.
Screaming at you, or were they nice?
Well, it's funny because the person who hooked me up with them, he said, "Oh, tomorrow you're on the phone with Bill and Mark. It's going to be a baptism by fire." I was like, okay. And Mark was actually very nice. I know he had a reputation for sometimes just tearing people a new one. He said, look, this is good writing. There's just a few things you're not doing right here. Like, so you remember when I said, Arthur Johnson said, "Oh, this is like writing a term paper," right? So that's what I did. I wrote it like a term paper. And in a term paper, you just do the whole logical thing. You do this whole argument, and that whole argument, and that whole argument. And he said, that's all well and good, but in copy, you can't go on too long about one thing. You got to mix things up or people get bored. Don't go more than a page or a page and a half on this point here. Shift to something else, then come back. And then he said to me, when you're talking about these investments, you have to recreate the feeling of what it was like to make that money so that the reader feels what it's like to make that money.
Gotcha. Just like one question.
I was very cerebral, right? And I learned rhetoric in school, which is great. But here's the problem. When I got out of school, I got a job doing commission-only sales, and I sucked. And I sucked because A, I was shy. B, I was debating my fucking customers because I learned rhetoric. I learned how to present arguments and counter arguments. And so I would win the debate and lose the sale, right? I didn't realize, no, you don't do that. You have to, right? That's why I make people read Dale Carnegie, like right out of the gate, second book we read, Yeah. So anyway, learned a lot from those guys. Learned a lot about copy. Learned a lot about, one of the big things I learned is make the product invisible. So I had read in an advertising book that you want to talk about benefits and features.
Yeah.
So I started writing about features. They said, no, don't write about the feature. I said, there's every month you'll have a Q&A section in the back. No, don't write that. Don't describe the product at all. Don't describe the deliverables. Describe the benefits. Okay, got it. Then I learned, what was the other one? I wrote this piece where I did problem, agitate, solution.
Mm-hmm.
Time-tested formula.
Yeah.
So I wrote problem, whatever it was, agitate them. The solution is you subscribe to this newsletter. And Bill Bonner tore me a new asshole. He said, "Oh, how convenient that the solution just happens to be the thing that we're asking them to spend money on. No, you don't do that." And then the person who described it most eloquently, I think, was Dan Kennedy. He said, you say problem, agitate, generic category of solution, then into your solution. So Dan built his list by doing talks all over the country and selling magnetic marketing. That was his lead product.
Yeah.
So people would go into this big arena because they wanted to see Colin Powell speak, or Bush Sr., or whoever was the top guy on the bill. And then there'd be other speakers, and there'd be Zig Ziglar, and then Dan would be the last one to come out.
Close everybody.
And people are ready to leave the arena because they came what they see. And he goes, all right, if you just leave if you don't care about money and you don't want your business to make any money, whatever he said, right? And so he gets a hook, and he does the problem. You're a business owner, and you want to make more sales, and you have all these problems, and it's hard being a business owner, especially a small business owner. And so he did the problem, he agitated them, and then he presented the solution.
Yeah.
There's this thing called direct response marketing. And he showed examples. Here's these postcards I wrote for Giorgio's Italian Grotto. And they were very entertaining examples. Here's an example of this plumber who came into my house and he did this and this and this. And I ended up spending all this money with him. And he goes, so now the person's watching Dan's talk and they're thinking, oh my God, the answer to my prayer is direct response marketing. This is awesome. I'm going to start doing direct response marketing in my business. Because he educated them.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is awesome. I'm going to do response marketing. And then it occurs to them, oh, wait a minute. I don't know how to do direct response marketing. And right at the moment that it's occurring to them, Dan says, I have this product. It's called magnetic marketing. It's a collection of sales letters, postcards, sales scripts, radio commercials, whatever the hell it was, all this stuff he had in there. It was a big collection. And we've got something for everything. And all you have to do is take our templates and put your information into the template and mail it, and it'll make you a bunch of money. And I forget what the price was, but it was like, we normally $799, but if you get it today, you could get it for $399. And there would be a stampede to the back of the room to buy.
Running?
Running. People, I've seen people actually pushing each other to get to things. It's like, so, and then by the way, when they get there, they get upsold. Okay, you can get the silver version, or we could give you the gold version for $699 or $599, whatever the hell it was, right? And that's how he built his list. So that was a lesson I learned from Bill Bonner and then was reinforced and clarified by Dan Kennedy.
Got it. I have to go back to something random and really cheesy.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask a cheesy question to the best copywriter in the world. And that's
Pisces. Thank you for asking.
What is his daily routine, right? Everybody talks about their daily routine.
My daily routine?
Yeah, I'm not talking about like your morning routine, but I'm talking about like what you just said. You study ads like a little bit every day. So
look, I'm not writing all the time, so I don't do what I used to do.
Right? Let's start there. What did you used to do?
Now, I used to write for a living, so I would study the ads, I would study the product, I would study the audience, I would do all the research. And I could go into that if you want, because I teach my writers what to do to research. But now I'm mostly copy-chiefing the other writers, and I'm doing strategy and big ideas and marketing strategy and that kind of stuff. And also I do the little thing I did with you guys this week, and I do those occasionally. And it's more like a fun hobby.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I was talking to somebody about the different identities we all have, right? And, like my ex-wife, her number one identity is a mother. She identifies as a mother.
Yeah.
And I identify as a father. That's very up there. That's probably number two. But number one for me would be teacher. So I as a father, I'm trying to teach things to my kids. As a copy chief, I'm trying to teach. Every time I critique writing, it's a teaching moment. Yeah. I don't want to have to keep telling them the same thing every time. I want them to learn the lesson and apply it the next time they write for me. Yeah. So as a copy chief and when I train my copy cubs, that's all teaching.
Yeah. So partly research. That's you do some research every day, I guess.
But I do a fraction of what I used to do, but I do enough so that I'm on top of things. And then I can ask questions. Like when a person tells me, I want to do this hook. Well, what are you basing that on?
Yeah.
It's got to be grounded in facts. You can't just pull a hook out of your ass and say, oh, I think this. Well, why do you think that? I don't know. And it would kind of be good to know what people are buying, what they're not buying, what their fears and frustrations are, what their desires are. Like, wouldn't that kind of be good to know if you're going to write to these folks? So we look at the controls, and we look at what's working. We look at what's not working. We look at what's bombed. We look at our controls. We look at our competitors' controls. We interview customers, but you have to be careful when they're interviewing you. You're interviewing them because they're not going to give you accurate data. There's a whole skill to how to get the truth out of people, how to get them to spill their guts. I mean, you could spend a whole day on that. But one thing that I find very, very valuable is, and I learned this from a lovely young copywriter named Valentina Volchinsky. She said it perfectly. She said, when people are on Reddit, they are being their true, unfiltered selves.
Anonymous on Reddit. Yeah.
because they're anonymous and they're just being, when they're writing somewhere else, they're filtering it. When they're giving you a testimonial, they're trying to talk in testimonials.
Yeah.
When you're interviewing them on the phone, they're telling, if you do a focus group or some nonsense like that, they're telling you what's going to make them look good, or they're telling you what they think you want to hear, or they're just, there's, that quote from Mark Twain, there's two reasons a person buys, the reason he tells everybody and the real reason, right?
Yeah. And I think you talked a little bit about that. The real reason they tell you after they think the interview is over.
So yeah, this is a great thing when we interview customers. So one of our controls is for a nitric oxide product that we've been selling for, I don't know, a dozen years. So we've had so many different controls for this thing. And the current one is Superhuman at 70. And it starts with a story of this guy who's in his 70s and he's a drummer in a rock band. Now, he spent most of his life dreaming of being a drummer in the rock band, but instead working at a shitty job as a elementary school custodian.
That's tough.
And always dreamed of this. And then when the day finally came and he retired, his hands hurt. He didn't have good circulation. He was, right? And then he took this stuff and all of a sudden, holy crap. And now he's playing music festivals out in the Nevada sun for hours at a time, and he's living his dream life. And that's what our audience wants. They want to live their dream life now.
That's great.
We have another one, we always talk about this, like they worked their whole life to get here, and now it sucks. So it doesn't have to suck. You can crush it in your 60s, 70s, even 80s.
Yeah. Is that kind of one of the ones you're the most proud of then? If you look at all your projects.
So I didn't write this. My writer, Nicole Piper, wrote it, and we were going somewhere with this before. Of course, I went on a tangent like I always do. So Nicole's interviewing all these different customers, and they're just giving her pat answers. And so what would happen is at the end of the interview, when they thought they were done, she would chat them up a little bit. She'd go, okay, well, thank you. That was great. Thanks. I really appreciate that you took the time today. And then she would just chat them up. And now they've kind of kicked back and let loose. And now they're telling her the real stuff, the good stuff.
Yeah.
So that whole story about the drumming, that didn't come up till the dude thought the interview was over.
Yeah. That's funny stuff. So yeah, what I like is that you actually have testimonials and stories and results. So I'm curious, what's the project you are the most proud of? It could also be that your students wrote, but something that was life-changing or that just make you really proud.
There's a few. The ones, of course, that ran the longest, those are always, Bottom Line Health. They were just kind of puttering along, and then I beat their control by 200 and it was 250% or something. And all of a sudden, it became a huge product for them with a ton of subscribers, and it ran for over 10 years, that control.
That's crazy.
Different leads, but guts were the same. There's another control. I told you there's one we've had for 15 years. And this is for a newsletter. So it's kind of, it's not big money anymore because that's a very tiny part of our business. The supplement business is the biggest part of our business. And then the skincare is the second biggest, which I want to change that. I want to make the skincare huge, but it's a very competitive market. So we got a lot of work to do. But back to the newsletter part of the business, we have a newsletter, Second Opinion, which is unbelievably great. The stuff this guy is doing is amazing, defies belief. He just has cures for things that supposedly are incurable. And it's all based on real things. He still sees patients. He until recently, he was still seeing patients 4 days a week. Now he's 77, right? So now I think he's cut back to 3 days a week or something. But he has other doctors in his clinic, and they have all these amazing therapies that work way better than, most of the stuff you've heard about. So this is a passion project for us because we get to talk about stuff that saves people's lives, for real.
Yeah.
So I had a control that I wrote, and it was in its 7th or 8th different iteration. But again, the body copy was probably 80% the same as when I wrote it 15 years ago. And we got to a point, this was around 2016, when it was dead. We thought, we're done. We've done as many new leads as hooks as we can. It's time to do a whole fresh new thing, right? And then I got this idea one day. I don't know if you remember what happened in 2016. You were probably like 8 back then, right? How old were you? 8 or 9 years old? I'm just fucking with you. In 2016, that was the year when all the people died. Prince died. Muhammad Ali died. Glenn Fry died. Patty Duke died. Gary Shandling died. Alan Rickman died. David Bowie died. It was just one after another after another. It was like, oh my God, like, when's this going to end? Finally, it's the end of the year. It's Christmas. And we're like, thank God this week's over. And that week, George Michael and Carrie Fisher both died. It's like, it was crazy, right? So I got this idea and I wrote this. It was a big tabloid. It was with the newsletter, we're mostly direct mail because none of the platforms online will accept our advertising. Because, you're saying this crazy stuff, right? Which, we talked about that early today, right? The majority is very often wrong.
Yeah.
So, and if you do things the way most people do them, then you are by definition mediocre.
Yeah.
So, I got this idea, and it's a big honking tabloid in your mailbox. You can't miss it when you open your mailbox. And you open it up, and it's got pictures of Prince, Muhammad Ali, Patty Duke, Gary Shandling, David Bowie, Alan Rickman, Glenn Fry. We had Joan Rivers in there. She had died 3 years earlier, but people didn't remember that. And because every one that I picked, I could actually pay off the promise. You have to make sure that everything you say in your advertising is 100% true, right? So you see all these pictures, immediately you know what it is. And then underneath, a big headline in New York Post, kind of heavy sans serif font, all caps, killed by conventional medicine. And then the subhead is, these beloved celebrities would still be alive today if they knew what you're going to learn in the next 5 minutes. And so from out of nowhere, boom, came right back to life.
Yes, you would not be able to run that on any platforms.
No.
But that's cool. And then it took off again.
It took off again. That ran for a while. Then we turned it into a book-a-log with the book titled Dance on Your Doctor's Grave. That did well for a while. Then COVID happened, and the response to that plummeted. The response to our supplement offers went through the roof because, people were buying a lot of supplements during COVID. But the response to that plummeted because we're saying dance on your doctor's grave, and doctors are heroes. Everybody's thinking of doctors as heroes. They're the ones who are saving lives during COVID. How dare you, right? You can't say that. Remember what I said a few days ago. Every message is of its time and place. You can't just indiscriminately swipe things from the past and just substitute words. It has to be congruent with the time and place that you're in when you're selling something.
Yeah.
Nothing occurs in a vacuum. So the Dance on Your Doctor's Grave stopped working, so we moved to some other stuff. And then now our current control, we had one, it was a news headline, California makes it illegal for doctors to express their opinion. That was a real thing. They made a law. Damn. And so, but then they repealed the law. So then our current one, I think, is Wall Street analyst to pharma execs, let them die. That's the headline. So it's because there was I think it was an analyst, and she wrote to all the pharma execs, look, I don't think this curing patients is a good business model. So there's this drug they had that was super effective, and she's like, you shouldn't sell that. You should sell the old stuff so that they keep coming back for repeat, continuity.
Yeah, makes sense. You don't care about
so
lives.
That became our headline,
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. A lot of crazy stuff going on. You still want to do a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, in terms of growing your company.
Crazy in what way?
I mean, crazy growth, right?
I'd love to, yeah.
So that's where one of the last questions I wanted to ask you today is, where do you want to go? What are you going to focus on? I think you talked a little bit about some TV stuff that you're doing. Maybe you don't want to talk about, maybe you want. But I'm just curious, like, what is your plan for the upcoming 3 to 5 years?
So I don't want to talk too much in detail about my plan, but I'd love to get us up to 100 million very soon.
Yeah. That's the end goal.
That's not the end goal. That's the next
step.
The next step.
Okay, so you're not done yet. Like, how many years do you still want to keep doing this?
I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know if I'm ever going to retire.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to maybe take, like the doctor I told you about, he went from 4 days a week to 3.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
I like doing good work, but I like having fun, and I like, that thing, work hard, play hard. I would also add rest well. Can't burn the candle at both ends. You got to have your chill and relax time. You got to get plenty of sleep. You got to give your body time to recover.
Gotcha.
I'm not 20 years old anymore.
You look like 20 years old.
Oh, thank you.
So you're going to be good. I think you're going to live forever and still go into space, but we'll see.
I'm not going into fucking space.
All right, the last one. I hope you can answer it, because maybe it's a little bit of a weird question, but what is the funnest offer you have worked on? That was just like, fun, hilarious. Just
hilarious? I don't know if anything was hilarious, but what was the most fun offer I remember? That's a good question. I don't know. Everything has elements of fun and elements of right? Like nothing ever goes perfectly smoothly, right? So I don't know. I always enjoyed writing stuff for things that I was the audience for it. So, when I was in my mid to late 30s, I wrote a few controls for Men's Health magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the audience. I was their demographic. So it was easy. It just wrote itself.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm writing to old women, older women, I'm not an older woman. So I have to channel that. I have to get in their head. And, I've written a lot of controls for women. Rodale Press was a client of mine for many years. We wrote stuff for Prevention Magazine and Prevention Health Books. And then I did the Women's Health Letter. I did the Susan Lark Health Letter. I do the skincare stuff, right? It's always more challenging to write for an audience that you are not a part of.
Yeah. Okay.
So if anything was fun about the men's health thing, it was like, oh, this is easy. I know what these dudes want. What do dudes want? They want to get laid, right? They want big arms, flat abs. Men are very simple creatures.
I guess so. Yeah. All right. I think that's it for today.
All right.
Thank you very much. And
my pleasure.
Until the next time.